Hello, I'd like to welcome Dianne Stepp and Willa Schneberg. They're going to read from their most current poetry, maybe some older poems as well. Dianne's going to read first. Dianne's most recent chapbook, A Nest's Dark Eye, charts a grieving mother's journey in the aftermath of her oldest son's suicide. Pauline Peterson said of these poems, they are finely crafted musical lamentations, a poet mother trying to fathom her son's final devastating actions. They offer a sorrow, keen insight. It's fraught with luminous beauty. Dianne.
Well, thanks to everybody for coming tonight. Lovely to see you all and to be able to share a night of poetry without the darkness and the slippery streets and the snow and germs and all of that stuff. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and get started reading poems from The Nest's Dark Eye. And I want to start with a gentle poem about the past. When I was a young mother in the Skagit Valley, and when my son David, who committed suicide about 10 years ago, was only a baby. This is called Abundance, 1965. They picked foliotas, chanterelles, stewed them in butter, kneaded cardamom, salt into good brown bread, hiked the logging roads for huckleberries, parting the glittery leaves to pluck the ruby fruit. From the farmer down the road, they bought their milk for pennies, churned butter, ice cream, at the sink, brewed dandelion wine from hundreds of cow pasture sons, morphed them to bottled moonlight. They drove the shore to the reservation where the Swinomish beach stained salmon carried home silver flanks to sweeten on alder fires. Who could blame them for thinking they would never die? You know, I wanted to start with that poem because I think young people, as I was then, just are unprepared, don't really foresee the kinds of sorrows they may have to deal with in their life, the kind of age of innocence in a way. This next poem is the first poem in the book. I'm only going to read the second half of it. This poem was based on a trip that my husband, Mike, who has been so supportive of me during this whole period, took me to the Steens Mountains. And I would say that this is the first time I was ever able to write again, or just a rough period of being stunned in the beginning. Afterwards, it was as though a bulldozer shoved relentlessly at the bricks of his life as we tried to shore up the crumbling mortar. We stopped to gulp the shade of every juniper on the way to the ranch where three brothers raised mules for saddle for the First World War. Washouts from last spring's floods corrugate the trail. A mountain bluebird perches on a fence post, a brazen bit of male fluff who scolds from post to branch. We cross the bridge look down at the lush meadow of unbelievably green grass, where the solo cabin one brother built for himself still stands. I lean for a moment against you and ask if you think my son might have found solace here in this thigh-deep beauty, hugged between basalt cliffs, in this cabin, scarred by scores of winters, squared off, log butted against the wind. I used that word stunned when I was reading that last poem, but that is what, at least initially, I felt so much at the time. And this poem, I was just thinking it's called Grief, but it could easily be renamed Stunned. Every day I walk fence, tracing an invisible line. I shift my weight one foot to the other, turn my head always to the left, never the right, peering into the dusk of that other world where he paces, tall, thin, pale, beside me, but facing the opposite direction. I've hurt myself, pulled a muscle at waistline on my right side, craning to see, twisting to search the shape of his death. I stretch to ease the pain. I sit down. I put my right leg across my left knee. I lean forward. I feel the pull in my thigh. Someone has imposed a screen along the border between us, a no man's land where all color is subtracted. When I turn my head, he stands in a night that never falls, his face ashen above faded denim. Is it accusing, stunned, or merely blank? My own face is a mask. It stares at me from the mirror. In the morning, I scrub it with a soapy cloth, rub cream into it, around the eyes, forehead, cheeks. I apply gloss to its lips. If I want to, I can make it smile. During this time, I had, it was really kind of crazy. I mean, there's a reason why that term crazy with grief is there, because it is such a crazy time sometimes. And during this time, I had a lot of different kinds of sessions, things that I would get fastened on and go over and over again. And one of these was, I kept thinking how great it would be to have a milk cow, and how wonderful it would be to have your life guided by the rhythms of this other animal. And I talked to people about it a lot, and I just thought, well, if my next life, I'm going to have a Jersey cow. Anyway, I wrote this poem, and it wasn't until I actually found the title for it that I understood what the obsession about the cow was about. And this is called Solace. If I weren't a city girl, I'd get myself a Jersey cow with a good temper, who'd walk to the barn of her own accord and wait for me at the milking parlor, and not kick or flick her tail in my face or let down until I was ready. Let the magpies of progress screech. I'd still submit my days to mirror the needs of her body. Mornings and evenings, I'd soak the swell of her udder. I'd lean into the warm brew of her flank, and it would be like leaning against the side of a mountain. Lament. When he was alive, I grieved at how he used to scold me because I whacked the blade of the chopping knife on the side of a clove of garlic, at how he rolled his eyes when I salted my eggs, or jutted his jaw at some remark I made. Revenge of the grown son, I said to myself, ruining my own rebukes to my mother. I fixed the clove on the board to prepare the stew for dinner and feel the deep tears rise. Oh, my darling son, how could you leave us so? This poem is called Matins. During the pandemic, when we were all quarantined, I raised all the starts for my vegetable garden inside the house. And this is a poem about the tomatoes. Mornings, I cross the wet grass to the greenhouse to see the tomato seedlings. I check the temperature, admire their resilience. These ferny beans, stems as thick as my finger, despite the cold, or perhaps because of it. Though I miss their little pots on my bedroom desk, miss opening the curtain for them each morning, miss the weeks I fed and watered them, fretting their spindly growth in weak indoor light. And though I rarely pray, not down on my knees sort of prayer, it was devotion I felt all those days I leaned over them in gratitude for each small leaf that trembled. This poem is called That Last Summer. The clematis hadn't overgrown the corner post of the deck yet, hadn't sent its urgent vines along the roof beam. Robins hadn't sought safety in its shadows. Their chicks' yellow beaks hadn't opened like twin flowers on wobbly stems. I hadn't watched from my deck chair the parent birds fly relays, worms bristling from their beaks, hadn't peeked at the blue fragment in the nest's dark eye. Wild rabbits hadn't found our yard yet. My fingers hadn't twitched to touch the soft fur of the kits hidden in a twist of garden mulch. The sun hadn't shone through the sheer membrane of the mother's ear, staining it red. I hadn't learned to grow garlic yet, hadn't learned to braid their stalks, never got the chance to send the perfume of their oils home with you. Oh, my son, why couldn't I find a way to keep you tethered to us? Another trip we took to, to get away was over a place called Bill Jake Hollow, which I love the name of that. Bill Jake Hollow, which is in eastern Oregon, and we took the camper and just camped out in this great field. This is another, I would say, poem of solace for me. Bill Jake Hollow. You come to a place like this to find refuge from your life in the city. No traffic, no people, no internet. Only the contrail of a lone plane overhead. At noon, nighthawks pierce the sky for insects. Beyond the flats, erosion creases the brown hills. A sparse forest of junipers tries to hold the soil from its desire to slide. From the hollow, the wind comes up, blusters a bit, slackens. Just a few white clouds, slow moving boats in a tranquil sea. You come to a place like this as to a pool to restore yourself in the desert landscape, to swim slowly, breaststroke, side stroke, to float peacefully on your back. You come to walk across the flats to the river, to step carefully through a whole village of pink flowers. And this is the final poem. It could have been anywhere, but it was the Bell Surf Cafe in Kihei, where I sipped coffee and watched the merchants raise the shutters on their open air shops. Beneath chairs on the patio, little zebra doves cooed and scrabbled for crumbs. The tall palms leaned in. I was still desperate for answers, what I did or didn't do. How far back before all the forks in the road disappeared, and one road only led to the cabin in Hana, where my oldest son took his life. This is the language I used to soften the truth of what he did to himself. From the depths of her shop, a woman selling sarongs carried armfuls of purple, red, turquoise sashes, arranged them on hangers, and selecting one with white magnolias splashed across a sea of black, she draped it on a silver rack where it flew solo. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What poignant and lovely poetry. I'd like to welcome Willa Schneberg. Willa is a poet, ceramic sculptor, and interdisciplinary artist, curator, and a licensed clinical social worker. and private practice. The Naked Room, her sixth poetry collection, is a true synthesis of her life as a psychotherapist and her life as a poet. Among the honors she has received are the Oregon Book Award in Poetry, the Barbara Deming Memorial Fund Award, second place in the Allen Ginsberg Poetry Awards, inclusion in the year's Best Fantasy and Horror 19th collection, 2 fellowships in poetry from Literary Arts. Welcome, Willa.
Wonderful to be here. Delighted to be reading for Head for the Hills. I want to thank Dale for her creativity, both poetic and visual, and for her hosting this event. I also want to thank Sherry Levine, the founder of Head for the Hills and former host, for continuing to support this special series. I also want to thank members of the poetry community and members of the helping field, both healers and those who seek healing, who can be one and the same. Without you, the Naked Room, my new collection, so funny how it looks on the screen, would not have come into being. It is also my pleasure to read with Dianne Stepp. Thank you, Dianne, for your powerful, brave, and poignant poems. I want to start by talking about the title of my new collection, The Naked Room. I'm calling this The Naked Room, unlike the convention of a title being usually from one of the titles of the poems in a collection. This is conceived as a whole, and I want to think of it as the Naked Room as the place where when a person comes in to talk to a therapist, they can feel they can be truly themselves and say whatever they actually need to say. The Naked Room is a true synthesis of my life as a poet and my life as a psychotherapist. It is also a history of mental health treatment to the current day and is divided into sections that relate to mental health terms: asylum, case history, straitjacket, 50-minute hour, reality testing, termination, which I will discuss a little when I read. I'll try to read maybe a poem from each section. For those of you who may have the book, I'm going to start with page 8 from the asylum section. And that poem is entitled Tiny Monuments. And Carolyn Martin, who is here, I think she published this poem in her, the long running, anyway, wonderful, wonderful journal called Tiny Monuments. I want to tell you a little bit about the cover because it relates to this poem. This is an outdoor memorial at Oregon State Hospital in Salem, where the lives of people who died at Oregon State Hospital were celebrated. At one time, there were 3,500 canisters were kept there, decaying and abandoned in a room in the hospital. The Oregon State Hospital Cremains Memorial was dedicated in 2014. As of September 2021, 894 canisters with ashes have been claimed by families. Tiny monuments for David Mizell, who photographs canisters holding the ashes of the patients at Oregon State Hospital. He really brought that to the attention of the world with his amazing photographs, tiny monuments. When human beings were still locked away for sadness clinging like a marine layer, voices saying how awful they are, going fetal when cars backfire or corks pop. They were housed at the Oregon State Insane Asylum, and when they ceased to be, they were cremated. If no one claimed a brother, a daughter, or a father, the ashes were kept in numbered copper canisters on pine shelves in an underground vault. Not infrequently, the water table rose, giving the forgotten homes uniquely their own, coated with efflorescent and mineral dazzle, where an alchemy of copper and water bloomed and burst into color. These tiny monuments to the scorned and unknown, where patinas of pink, burnt sienna, ochre, aqua, and if you look closely, you will find moon craters, archipelagos, frozen waterfalls, big dippers, and dunes with lone tracks. The next poem is in the case history section on page 18. And that poem is about my husband's grandfather, who died in March 17th, 1928. American history, and it's a prose poem. Dr. Thin made history fighting to be Aryan. He was also my husband's godfather, thinned, and his wife watched Robin at 4, while his mother was in labor. Soon his sister's head would crest between her legs. United States versus Bhagat Singh thinned, went all the way to the Supreme Court. The justices agreed that although Thind was technically a member of the Caucasian race, he was not Caucasian in the popular sense of the word, so thus deemed not white. His citizenship was immediately revoked and he became un-American for all South Asians, including Robin's grandfather, Vashnu Das Bagai, to be naturalized or categorized as free white person. Vashnu's right to carry an American passport or own Bagai's bazaar on Fillmore, which he had scrimped to establish, was dissolved like words on a wet piece of paper, and his reason to wear a 3-piece suit obliterated. He booked a room in San Jose and wrote to his wife, Carla, "Well, dear, I have to leave you," and turned on the gas. I was raised with the phrase, "No Negroes, Jews, or dogs allowed," warning me that I shouldn't get too comfortable. Robin and I are comfortable together. Our hands often find the other, and when we sleep at night, we spoon. The next poem is from the Straight Jacket section on page 45. And there is a poem in the voice of a straitjacket, but this section is not really about literal straitjackets. It's about ways we are straight-jacketed. And this one is called Nightmare Recurrent. And often I write the persona poem, and this is such a poem. I observe myself as if through a telescope, wearing a hospital gown tied in back, sitting in a recovery room wallpapered with pink hearts in a city I don't recognize. The surgeons say they'll fix me right up, cut out the videotape in my brain of his pushing into me against the sink, of his hands on my bare ankles when I try to run. How could a cousin make me so disgusting? Something bad has to happen to him. I don't care what, I just want my asshole to be mine again. It looks like all my stuff's here. Clothes, shoes, keys, coins, wallet, paperback, and a kiwi, a fruit I don't eat. My boxes are on each piece of clothing, t-shirt, red flannel shirt, torn jeans, socks, hoodie, timbers cap, high tops. But I'm never ready to walk through the automatic doors. They lie, say I'm free to go, but he's still inside me, watching me whimper. I sling my backpack over my shoulder, plant my hands in my front pockets, play with pennies, lint, and the lanyard I lost in sleepaway camp. That's what I do, white knuckle it. But I'll always be small, him, humongous. The next poem is from the 50-minute hour section, and it's on page 51. And the 50-minute hour, for those of you who have ever been in therapy, that's been the typical time where you have the 50 minutes and then the therapist writes notes. Those of you in the East Coast know that it's 45 minutes there for many therapists. I think in Oregon, we're still 50 minutes, but I seem to go close to 60. This one is entitled Pearls, and it relates to my fantasy of going into Anne Sexton's session with her psychiatrist, Martin T. Orne. Pearls. I wish I could have been with you and Dr. Orne in his office, you both sucking in cigarette smoke, letting it curl out through your nostrils when you said, I want to be the child, not the mother. It should be innate. Why have I failed so miserably? My words on paper spark, don't you think? You thought writing might be good for me. These runes are really yours too. I would have seen you twist the string of pearls around your neck until it burst open, pearls cascading. One by one, I would have picked them up to place them in your cupped hands, all that milky light, and say, your poems are your poems. Your poems are your pearls, yours alone. And then the next is from the reality section, page 72. And reality testing is often if a person goes to an emergency room where they go to a psych unit, they want to know, often will ask, do you know what day it is? Do you know your name? Do you know the time? Do you know the president? It's really a way of finding out if someone might be psychotic. And this short poem is for the great painter Agnes Martin, who was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And then I'll read 2 poems from the last section, Termination. 72 inches times 72 inches for Agnes Martin. The voices were prohibitive. Don't buy land, no cats or dogs, nothing but canned tomatoes, walnuts, and hard cheese. But they couldn't see the map, the gift of her mind's eye, a square postage size stamp grid of lightly penciled, lightly uneven rectangles, and couldn't thwart the plating from materializing on a gessoed, stretched canvas that would be propped up against her studio wall. The boxes she ruled were not padded cells, the bodies of coiled black lines, but hives of gold leaf and moving clouds. And the last section, Termination, is kind of an odd term. I don't even really know how that got started, but it's kind of terrible. But as a client starts moving towards that they feel they have done the work they want to do in therapy, they call those sessions termination sessions, a number of sessions or a final session. But this section is much larger. It's about terminations of all sorts, the ending of relationships, the metaphor in that sense of those deaths, and then also about literal deaths. And I'm going to read a poem that is about deaths that should never happen, the deaths of war. Moonlight. This time the truck, the dirt road, the field is in Srebrenica. He is packed in a battered flatbed with other men, old, young, whimpering in fear. The truck lurches a few kilometers down a back road, 5 hauled out, 5 shots. A few more kilometers, 4 dragged out, 4 shots. Again, the trunk comes to a halt. A boot on his rump pushes him out. His wrists tied, he lies face down, hears gunfire, tastes blood, perhaps his own. Crabgrass makes the man's face, his nostril, crabgrass marks the man's face. His nostrils are forgetting how to take in air. The moon is full. In all direction, it stares at human beings past sorrow. And now this man, the weight of his silenced body pressing into the unfurrowed field. And the last poem is about my friend, Sarah Lance, who died too soon. Some of you may have known her. She was a poet in Portland, and she had this unbelievable spirit that was, and this laughter that was contagious. And I want to thank you all for being here. Italian Plum for Sarah Lance. We climb up lichen encrusted limbs to pluck purple black fruit, protected with white powder that hides their sheen. We are inundated with plums, burdened by bounty. Why do we merit this small happiness? Plums boiling down in the big stainless steel pot, mason jars brimming with jam, brown paper bags bulging with enough for everyone. If only the plethora of plums could bring you back, but their days are even shorter than yours. They have burst their skins and are staining pavement. You were alive, but are no longer, and will not savor the juice of even one small plum.
Thank you so much, Willa. What a wonderful reading. I love your persona poems. I love your breadth of exploration.
Thank you.
Now we're going to start the open mic portion of the evening. And if you'd like to read, I know there are lots of poets here. Pam, you raised your hand right away. Do you want to read first? Unmute yourself when you're reading. Pam, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Stan, you're not reading yet?
Oh, I thought you said you can't hear me.
No, it's Pam Hepper is reading, but we
All
can't
right.
hear her either.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear
Yes.
me at all?
Yes, we
Okay,
can hear
good.
you.
All right. I was not going to read this today, but I just wrote it this morning, and the synchronicity was so great. I have to read it, and it's probably not finished, but this is what I wrote. It's called The Blues. What did I see on TV this morning? 1 out of 3 teenage girls contemplate suicide. I have 4 granddaughters, aged 10 to 15. I remember being their ages and the onset of my depression. How do we teach the children to, like a prayer, like we all have this, like we are aware? We are not alone. We are not the only ones. 2 4-day weekends in a row, so tired today. May our friends bring us back to life. May we laugh and smile with our open mouths and unclenched jaws. Shoulders down, running around the playground with flailing arms. Remember this, the way to find joy is in our moving bodies and with our friends. May our hearts beat with exuberance, not break from loss. Sing out the blues with your favorite YouTube video. Return to life with joy.
Thank you, Pam. Peter, would you like to read? Please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yes, I'm unmuted. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. This is a poem that, well, you'll see. I actually did find these old papers together. It's called Florence. Grandpa Pete paid Atlas Insurance Limited $6.23 in 1954 to insure daughter Selma's Persian lamb coat for $890. Furs were heirlooms in those days. Grandma Martha's lamb muffin mink stole, valued at an even $1,000. If only some relatives still lived, I could ask why those bills were preciously preserved in the same manila envelope as the death certificate of my oldest aunt, Florence Marks. Written and signed in clear cursive script, born July 15th, 1920, dead 5 weeks later. Cerebral hemorrhage, signed Dr. Abraham Greeley. He saw Florence on August 29th and 30th, but could not save her. She passed 11:30 p.m. on the 30th, laid to rest in Mount Zion Cemetery. Many babies died young those years before antibiotics. Pete and Martha made 2 more daughters, my mom Selma and my aunt Naomi. No one ever mentioned Florence in my presence. I wonder if Grandma and Grandpa lit a Yortzeit candle every August. Or did they wall off Florence's memory, focus on their living children? Those girls were so American. Saddle shoes, pleated skirts, cigarettes, furs, Brooklyn College, Buicks to drive. Pete and Martha kept proof of prosperity, close to proof of unspeakable sorrow. Did Florence teach them to savor what joy they had in this uncertain world? Thank you. Yes, just some questions I will never find the answer to.
Thank you, Peter. Sue Lick, would you like to read?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for Willa and Dianne for wonderful poetry and inspiration. Okay, we're going to take it a little lighter now. Title, Glad We Didn't Break a Hip. The road between our houses is a mix of slush, muddy ruts, and white between the tire tracks. Stiff-legged dog squats, leaving yellow stain, pulls me over runnels, chasing smells. When I knock on the dark green door, no answer, only chimney smoke, sleeping cats. Dog tilts her head, listening. Come on, I say, feet damp inside my purple tennis shoes. The sunroom is meant for summer days, but I see white hair, pink sweater, a wave. Over the snow, hello, hello, lawn chairs, cozy to the plug-in fireplace. Melting snow drips from the greenhouse roof as we old ladies chat among the succulents, Aerosmith on the radio. The dog sniffs cactus leaves and settles at my feet. My friend woke before dawn to snow and a coyote staring at her from the road. Later she walked despite her knees, crunching in her worn Montana boots. It was the light that called me out of bed. California girl still mesmerized by snow, posting pictures of the frolicking dog as she creates a paw print labyrinth. As we talk, new flakes begin to flutter, burying our tracks. But no one waits, and we have nowhere else to go. Nothing to do but watch the falling snow.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
I can see the dog anthology coming to life. Emily, would you like to read?
I would, thank you. And thank you for hosting this reading. It's been very, very moving. This is a poem from my new book titled Signs, which has just been published by the Poetry Post. It's called Take a Look at Sand Dunes. How shore becomes anvil, where ocean hammers out lines on your bones until you float with the driftwood. How waves measure your shadow before throwing a fresh seaweed shirt on your biography. How moonbeams write reverse curved storylines, now washed from your life without a hint of irony. How soft things crawl around in hard-edged regrets, eating the leftovers of your careless walk. Thank you.
Liz Nakasawa, would you like to read? Hi, Liz.
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Dale, for hosting beautifully as always. This poem's called Tour House of Robinson Jeffers. At the cusp of land and sea in Carmel, we enter the dark cottage where Robin and Una read Robert Louis Stevenson to the twins, their small laundry flapping in the wind, by candle, wrote and played chess, the red horse and queen now safely behind glass, rarely working in wood, only stone, when he first began building his home, one quiet stone following stone, Santa Lucia granite, local rock, rolled one at a time uphill from the beach, bereft of a team of horses. Then there were the mad additions, a top stone from a pyramid of Giza, salvaged slabs of a shipwreck's ballast, abalone from an Ohlone Indian encampment on this land, obsidian from Mount Shasta, slate from the officers' club at Fort Ord, Portuguese tile, a gravestone nabbed from a church in Ireland that the Jeffers carried across the country in their Model T. Una said the stone turned her blood to water and reminded her of home in County Down. Robin wrote poetry in the morning and worked on the house most afternoons, while Una collected wildflower seeds from everywhere and Irish ballads. All the books he loved are veiled behind thin, gold, diamond-shaped netting. I squint to see titles as our guide points to the 1911 Britannica, the only book on display. We're shown how the couple loved to write on the wall in the den, some Spencer on a dark high beam, a line from the Fairy Queen where the Red Cross knight pursues the good. In the bedroom we're led and are read the poem about the deathbed before us, which Robin both hated and revered. The one he died in during that unusual California snow. The same snow that fell the day he was born. I wasn't sure what phase the moon was in during our tour, but thought perhaps the tide had receded a bit since the time Una sewed white shirts with collars so her husband would look more like a poet. And one daily hawk watched Jeffers hew with stone. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Anne, would you like to read?
Yeah, I'd love to read. Thank you, Dale. Thanks for hosting. And I really want to thank Dianne and Willa for sharing your words and your hearts, and it just was really powerful and touching. And I'm very glad I was here to listen to it. So thank you. This is called Aftershocks, and the epigraph is Gaziantep, February 2023. Is the man who owned the backgammon shop on the spiraling slope along the castle walls still alive? Are his boards inlaid with mother of pearl, rubble, and dust? Is it better to die quickly than survive? Is a game lost better than a game never played? Have you ever rolled dice, watched them skitter and clunk against wood sides, come up doubles? What is the meaning of luck? How much have you lost? What's worth a gamble? Why didn't I buy a board, one with intricate swirls of petals and leaves, when I had the chance? How would it feel to skim my fingers along where his fingers carved, pressed, and fit piece after shimmery piece? Would it have been any help then or now? Who knows our fates, the slim chances of connection, even once, let alone second chances, the chances of being pulled from rubble alive after all this time? Could beams, plaster, and debris blanket against dark and frigid air? Could hope be something worth keeping? What if I told you I didn't like that man, the way he sat in a squat chair along the wall by the front door and watched my every move with his hooded eyes? What if I told you his answers to my questions? How much for this board? How much for that? Were short grunts, mumbles in Turkish. What if I told you the shop felt like a tomb, dark and close, and when I stepped out into the sun, I only felt relief? What if I had smiled all those years ago and asked if he would like to play a game? Would he have said yes? Would that have changed anything? Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Susie, would you like to read?
Sure. Thank you, Dale. Well, I'm going to read this poem called To My Great-Grandmother, because one of my favorite poems in Willa's book was a found poem that lists reasons why women, I think it was specifically women, were committed to institutions in, was it 1905, I think, or something like that.
Oregon State Hospital, right?
Yeah.
But not just women.
Anyway, it's a great list. Surprising list. And it made me think of this poem I wrote a little while ago. My great-grandmother was Hattie Burton Harris, and she lived from 1865 to 1922. You, whose first words are Yiddish, who travels as a toddler from the Pale across the ocean, grasping the fabric of your mother's skirt, as the swells make you both sick for 6 long weeks that seem forever. You, at 19, in the front parlor of your parents' house on Lafayette Street, surrounded by fluff and feathers on the hats you and your sisters make for the fancy women who seek your art. You in a long dress, dark hair, a crown, ushering the ladies in and back out to waiting carriages, discreetly taking their money as long shadows make their way across the overstuffed chairs and anti-massacres. You, a widow for many years, your grandson, just 5, tell me, what rage caused you to pick up the match, rasp its sulfur head to flame, set it against the hem of your dress? What rage or what terrible sorrow? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susie. Vivian, would you like to read?
I would. Thank you so much, Dale. And thank you to Willa and Dianne for such a moving reading. And also, this poem, I should say, is also for Eleanor, who apparently was admiring the daffodils when she fell. The name of this poem, which I recently wrote, is called Daffodils Along a Stone Wall, Mid-February. And actually, it's after Ellen Bass's Fungus on Fallen Alder at Lookout Creek. Yellow goblets of sunshine stirred by morning gusts, golden bells fingered by the wind's cold touch, they nod and bob. Stalwart stems tether them to earth, sun-warmed stone wall has their back. How can they bloom so early? Their sisters are still pushing through dark, cold ground, still answering the call of light and warmth. But these flowers, already full-fledged flags of spring, protected, warmed, hold their own against February's icy surprises. They reach their apogee before their sisters emerge. First to bloom, they will be first to wither and die. But aren't they bright and sweet? Don't they raise your spirits, give you hope? Thank you.
And that poem gives us all hope. Daniel, would you like to read?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. I'm trying to join this larger poetry community, so it's good to be here. And thanks also to Dianne and Willa for the wonderful readings. This poem is called Hanging On. December had been unseasonably warm. Heavy rains flooded city streets and farm fields, swelled the Kankakee out of its banks. Then the mercury dropped like a stone. Sleet turned everything to ice. Stuck in the apartment, out of sorts from a recent spat, we edged around each other, barely spoke. Not even champagne and candles could salvage New Year's Eve. We slept, dreamed in opposite directions. When the roads cleared, desperate for change, we drove to the state park, slid down a muddy slope to watch the river, still half a mile wide, hauling tree limbs and debris north to the Illinois. The only sound, the slosh of water against the bank. Shoulder high, fragile plates of ice jutted from tree trunks, left behind by the freezing waters. Back at the apartment, we turned up the heat, drank hot coffee, watched the news from opposite ends of the couch. Coup attempt in Argentina, famine in Kenya, a 7-car pileup on an icy Indiana freeway. Through the wall, laughter, clink of beer bottles, the twang, twang, thump, thump of the stones. Saw her today at the reception, glass of wine. On TV, jumbled cars, flashing lights, the commercial. At the river, fragments of ice, wafer thin, hanging on. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Let's see. Chris, would you like to read?
Yes, I would, Dale. Thank you. I can never decide on the titles. This is called After the Holidays, but it's working. Whisper to me, February, the true reason for your arrival. Those stores eagerly fly your white and red banners, and my neighbor's narcissus sprouts yellow spikes and furls from below. I hear only the raucous cries of blackbirds who sport feathers of oil slick rainbows. They march across lawns in a straight line, a platoon scavenging for supplies. Smelling like a road worker who's forgotten to wash, you are the month meant to tease us with signs of life while we eat the last of what is left in the larder. Comfort food, meals of soup, chewy dark bread, and beans flavored with molasses and mustard. Sticks to your ribs, my dad would say to me, in the getting by months after Christmas and before taxes. Mom would push her food around her plate until my dad cleared his and she could light a cigarette. Her family never hid in the basement from bill collectors or ate government-issued cheese. She will stare through the window pane until he finishes, chewing slowly, working to keep his store-bought teeth in his mouth. I will clear the table and wash. Dad will dry while Mom gets out the checkbook to balance the family books. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I don't see anybody else's hand raised. If you'd like to read, it's under the reactions button at the bottom of the page. And there's a thing that says raise hand. Would anyone else like to read? I can see your hands too. Stanley would like to read. Can you unmute yourself, Stanley? And then you can read.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Can you see me? No. How do I make myself seen? I don't know. All right, I'll go unseen. I found this poem on February 19th in the morning as I woke up. It's a short poem. It has one line in it in Italian. I'll tell you, it's Sotto questo sole, which means sort of this gentle sunrise. I borrowed it from a poem by Leonardo da Vinci. This morning sun streamed in through the slits in the blinds, like a lover's kiss on my cheek, alerting me to the new dawn. Sotto questo sole, a new day to be. Meadowlarks in barren trees, with timeless songs without lyrics. Spring, a calculable distance away. Time to reimagine peonies, lavender, dahlias, wisteria, witch's broom. Hallelujah.
Thank you, Stan. Would everybody unmute yourself? And if anyone has any questions for Dianne or Willa, you can ask your questions or give them words of congratulations and thanks.
Just thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll be looking
it's
for
just-
those books.
This was wonderful. Thank you. What beautiful readings by everybody.
Yeah, just wonderful work. I'm so glad I'm able to attend.
Yeah.
We'll keep going for you, Peter.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. It was a wonderful evening of poetry.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you for your amazing book. Yeah.
Thank you, Willa and Diane.
It was wonderful
And
to
Willa.
learn and to hear your poetry.
Mhm.
If you have any questions of us, don't be shy to ask.
Mhm.
Well, I've got Diane's book, but I need to get yours, Willa.
Yeah.
Norma.
Yeah, I have Diane's book too.
Norma. Hi, Norma.
Mm.
I came for inspiration
Did you get plenty?
and I'm leaving with enormous amount. Thank you ever so much.
Hi, Norma. Long time no see.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
And gratitude with it. What a wonderful evening of poetry. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Great. Hope to see you next month.
Ellen,
Yes.
Diane, both beautiful reading.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
I'll be looking for your next post.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye and thanks.
Thank you so much, all of you. It's great.
Thank you, Dale.
Thanks, Liz. Thank you, Willa. It was lovely.
Thank you, Dale. It was wonderful, your hosting. Thank you so much.